Raise your hand if you've ever felt like school didn't prepare you for real life. You memorize dates from history books, solve for X 100 times, but no one taught you how to manage your mind, master your memory, or focus your attention. Some of you were told you weren't smart enough, maybe you even believed it. I know, because when I was 5 years old, I suffered a brain injury and teachers told me I'd never learn like everyone else. I believed that. For years, I sat in the back of the class, feeling invisible, feeling broken. But then one day I discovered something. The problem wasn't my brain. The problem was the way I was taught. And today, I'm going to show you how to learn anything, fast, in a way school never taught you, because the truth is you were never the problem. By the time we're done, you'll walk out of here knowing exactly how to unlock your genius and make the impossible inevitable. When I say mindset over memory, what I really mean is that your brain's ability to store and recall information is directly shaped by what you believe about yourself. If you go into a new subject saying, "I'm bad at this," your brain looks for proof of that statement. It filters your experiences so that every small mistake feels like confirmation. You mispronounce a word in a new language, and instead of thinking, "Great, I'm learning," you think, "See, I can't do this." That belief acts like a lock on the door to your potential, and the worst part is you're the one holding the key. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. I'm not saying that to sound clever. I'm telling you because I lived it. For years, after my childhood brain injury, I sat in the back of classrooms afraid to speak, afraid to try, because my identity had been built around being the slow kid. My grades reflected that. My participation reflected that. My entire life reflected that story. And here's the truth. When you argue for your limitations, you invest energy in defending the very things that are holding you back. You're rehearsing failure before you've even started. One day I had a moment where I thought, what if my limitations are not facts but opinions? And that's when things shifted. You see, mindset is the lens through which your brain experiences the world. A dirty lens distorts everything. A clear lens lets in the truth. The moment I started asking, how can I, instead of saying, I can't, my brain stopped closing doors and started looking for windows. And those windows were everywhere. Books I hadn't opened, people I hadn't asked for help, resources I hadn't considered. I worked with a young woman once who wanted to learn to code. She had failed 3 online courses and told me, I guess I'm just not a technical person. That's a mindset trap. We reframed it. We said, you're not there yet. Just 3 words, not there yet. But it's powerful because it keeps the door open. She stopped seeing herself as someone who couldn't code and started seeing herself as someone who was in the process of learning to code. 6 months later, she was building her own apps. Did she magically become more intelligent in those 6 months? No. She changed her story, and that changed her strategy, her effort, and ultimately her result. When you shift your mindset, you change the questions you ask. A fixed mindset asks, can I do this? And is ready to accept a no. A growth mindset asks, how can I do this? And is ready to search until it finds the answer. This is the same principle elite athletes use. They don't walk into training thinking, I'm not good at this move. They think, how can I master this move? And then their brain goes to work running simulations, pulling on past experiences, making connections, because the brain is a problem-solving machine, but only if you give it a problem it's allowed to solve. Let me give you a very practical way to rewire this. Every time you catch yourself saying, I'm not good at, immediately add the word yet. I'm not good at public speaking yet. I can't remember names yet. That tiny addition is a mental crowbar. It prays open the door that your limiting belief is trying to slam shut, and when that door is open, even a cracked possibility can slip in. Your mindset also shapes your emotional state, and your emotional state shapes your memory. Think about a time you were deeply engaged, curious, and excited about what you were learning. You probably remember the details vividly. Now think about a time you felt anxious, defeated, or uninterested. The details fade, don't they? That's because your brain tags emotionally charged experiences as important and files them for long-term storage. If you want to remember more, you have to feel more. And mindset is the switch that turns on those emotions. Here's another example. A teenager I coached had convinced himself he was bad at science because he failed a test in middle school. Every science class after that felt like a punishment. When we dug into it, we found he was actually fascinated by how things work. He loved taking apart gadgets. His mindset wasn't, I'm curious about science. It was, science hates me. We flipped it. We started calling him the scientist in every conversation. Within months, he was acing tests, not because we changed the curriculum, but because we changed his identity. This is the call to action for you. Stop rehearsing your limitations and start rehearsing your potential. The next time you approach a subject, a skill, or a challenge, start with the belief that your brain is capable of growth. Write it down. I am a lifelong learner. My brain gets stronger the more I use it. Put that sentence where you'll see it daily, on your desk, your phone lock screen, your bathroom mirror. Repeat it until it's more familiar than the old story you've been telling yourself. Your brain listens to the most dominant voice it hears every day. And for most people, that voice is their own. Make that voice your biggest ally, not your harshest critic. Decide right now that your mindset will be one of possibility. Because when you believe you can, your brain will work tirelessly to prove you right. And when that happens, memory stops being a struggle. It becomes the natural byproduct of a mind that's open, engaged, and ready to learn. Motivation is not about willpower, it's about why power. People think they need more discipline, more self-control, more of that grit that gets you to the gym at 5 a.m. or keeps you studying when everyone else is watching Netflix. But discipline fades when it's fueled only by willpower. Willpower is like a battery. Use it long enough without recharging and it runs out. Why power is different. Why power is a generator. It creates energy instead of consuming it. When you know exactly why something matters to you, you don't need to be pushed. You're pulled toward it. I remember when I first learned speed reading. It wasn't because I wanted to impress people by finishing books faster. I wasn't chasing a number of pages. My why was deeply personal. My parents worked hard. My mom had 3 jobs at one point just to keep food on the table. I thought if I could learn faster, I could build a career sooner, contribute to my family, and give my mom the freedom she deserved. That vision of her not working herself to exhaustion was so vivid in my mind that skipping practice wasn't an option. I didn't have to convince myself to show up. My why dragged me out of bed before my alarm even rang. If you've ever watched someone transform their life seemingly overnight, chances are their why power got activated. They connected what they wanted to something bigger than themselves. Think about a parent who quits smoking the moment they find out they're going to have a baby. All the failed attempts before were powered by willpower, pushing against cravings. But now, there's a new reason, a new pull, and suddenly what was impossible becomes inevitable. When I work with students or professionals, one of the first things I ask is, why do you want to learn this skill? The most common answer is vague, to get better or to grow. That's not strong enough. A weak why can't stand up to strong obstacles. Your why needs to be emotional. It needs to be so personal that just thinking about it changes your heart rate. If it doesn't make you feel something, it won't keep you moving when the novelty wears off. Here's a practical way to find it. Grab a piece of paper and at the top write, I want to learn this because, then write your first answer. Now ask yourself, and why does that matter? Write that answer. Keep going at least 5 layers deep. This is called the 5 whys technique, and it peels away the surface reasons until you get to the core. For example, someone might say, I want to learn Spanish because it's useful. Why does that matter? So I can travel more easily. Why does that matter? So I can connect with people in their own language. Why does that matter? Because I value deep relationships. Why does that matter? Because I felt isolated as a child and never want to feel disconnected again. That last answer, that's why. Power, that's the emotional fuel. Once you find your why, you need to keep it visible. Write it on a sticky note and put it where you study. Make it your phone's wallpaper. Say it out loud before you start a session. Your brain loves repetition. It's how habits form. If you repeat your why often enough, it will become the default program your brain runs when you feel like quitting. I worked with a man who wanted to learn public speaking. His first why was, I want to be more confident. It sounded fine, but it didn't light him up. We kept digging. Eventually, he admitted his father had been a brilliant man with amazing stories, but was too shy to share them, and now that his father had passed, those stories were gone forever. He didn't want the same thing to happen to his own children. His real why was about legacy, leaving behind his voice, his ideas, his experiences. When he connected to that why, practicing his speech went from a chore to an honor. Your why power also changes the way you approach learning. Without it, you might give minimal effort, just enough to get by. With it, you start thinking strategically, how can I make this more engaging? Who can I learn from? What resources can I tap into? That curiosity is a side effect of caring deeply. And curiosity accelerates learning because it opens mental doors you didn't even know were there. Let's be honest, every skill worth having will test you. There will be days when it feels too hard, when progress seems invisible. If you're running only on willpower, those days will break you. But if you're running on why power, those days become tests of loyalty to your vision. You won't quit because quitting would mean giving up on something you've tied to your identity, your relationships, or your future. Here's your challenge. Choose one skill you want to learn and write down 3 reasons why it matters to you. Then take each reason and make it even more emotional. If your reason is to get a promotion, dig deeper. What will that promotion allow you to do? Travel, provide for your family, prove to yourself that you can. Once you have those reasons, read them every morning for the next 30 days. Watch what happens to your consistency, your energy, and your focus. Motivation that comes from the outside, like rewards or fear of punishment, can get you started, but it won't get you far. The motivation that lasts is the one you carry inside, anchored to the things that matter most to you. The moment you connect what you're learning to who you love, who you want to become, or the impact you want to make, learning stops being a task on your to-do list. It becomes part of your identity. And when something becomes part of your identity, you will fight for it, protect it, and pursue it with everything you've got. That's the power of why, not willpower, not luck. A vision so compelling it refuses to let you quit. Find yours, and you can learn anything faster, easier, and with a fire that doesn't burn out. You don't learn by consuming information, you learn by retrieving it. Most people think that if they just read their notes enough times, watch enough tutorials, or highlight enough sentences in a textbook, the information will stick. But that's not how the brain works. Learning is not a spectator sport. It's not about how many times you've seen the information. It's about how many times you've successfully pulled it out of your memory. That act of retrieval is what strengthens the neural connections, like lifting a weight to strengthen a muscle. If you only input and never output, your brain doesn't get the signal that this information is important enough to keep. Think about the difference between watching someone else ride a bike and riding it yourself. You can watch videos all day, read instructions, and understand the theory of balance. But the first time you actually get on the bike, you realize there's a gap between knowing about something and knowing how to do it. That's exactly how most people approach studying. They mistake familiarity for mastery. Just because something looks familiar on the page doesn't mean you can recall it when you need it. I worked with a group of medical students once who were drowning in information. They were studying from dawn until midnight reading their textbooks. But when test day came, they froze. Why? Because they had never practiced recalling the material under pressure. Their brains were like overstuffed filing cabinets where the files were unorganized. The information was in there somewhere, but they hadn't built a clear retrieval path to get to it. We switched their approach. Instead of rereading the same chapter, they would close the book and try to write down everything they remembered. At first it was frustrating. They would remember only a fraction of the content, and that triggered self-doubt. But here's the thing, forgetting is part of the learning process. Every time they tried to recall something and struggled, their brain got the message. We need to strengthen this pathway. Within weeks, their recall speed and accuracy skyrocketed. They were no longer hoping the answers would come to them during exams. They knew they could pull them up on command. This is where spaced repetition comes in. Your brain loves patterns. If you study something today, review it tomorrow, then in 3 days, then a week later, and so on, you send a signal to your brain that says, this is important. Keep it. Every review session strengthens the connection until it becomes automatic. It's the difference between walking through tall grass once and having to push your way through, versus walking that same path so many times it becomes a clear, well-worn trail. Imagine trying to remember someone's name at a party. You meet John, shake his hand, and move on. 2 minutes later, you've forgotten it. That's because you only processed it once. But if you say, nice to meet you, John, when you first hear it, then introduce him to someone else. This is my friend John. And then say goodbye using his name. You've retrieved it multiple times in a short period. That name now has a much better chance of sticking. One of the easiest ways to integrate retrieval into your learning is self-testing. This doesn't mean waiting until you feel ready to test yourself. It means testing yourself as a way of getting ready. Use flashcards, create practice questions, or simply close your book and explain the concept out loud. If you can teach it without looking at your notes, you've learned it. If you can't, you know exactly what you need to review. I remember coaching a young man preparing for a major job interview. He had pages of notes on the company, their products, and potential interview questions. At first, he read them over and over. I told him, close the notebook, tell me what you know. He stumbled, forgot key facts, and realized just how much he still had to work on. That experience shifted his entire approach. He started each study session by recalling what he could before adding new information. By the time the interview came, he didn't need his notes. His answers were already wired into his brain through repetition and retrieval. He got the job. There's an emotional component to this too. Retrieval practice builds confidence. When you can pull information from your mind without hesitation, you stop second-guessing yourself. That confidence feeds back into your performance, whether it's in a classroom, a meeting, or a high-stakes presentation. On the other hand, if you only ever review passively, you're likely to feel anxious when it's time to perform because your brain hasn't been trained to recall the information under real conditions. The call to action here is simple but powerful. Stop only putting information in. Start pulling it out tonight. Take whatever you're learning and set aside 5 minutes to recall it from memory. Tomorrow, do the same. Then again in 3 days. Write it, speak it, quiz yourself, but make it active. Don't wait until test day, pitch day, or performance day to find out whether you can remember. Train for retrieval the way an athlete trains for competition, by simulating the exact conditions where you'll need the skill. This principle will change how you learn anything: languages, instruments, technical skills, presentations, you name it. Your brain is not a storage unit, it's a living, dynamic system that gets stronger with use. Every time you retrieve a piece of information, you're telling your brain, this matters, and the brain listens. It will prune away unused connections and reinforce the ones you practice. If you want to learn anything fast, don't just consume, engage. Don't just review, recall. That's where the magic happens. If you really want to learn something, teach it. That might sound backward. Most people think you have to master a skill before you can teach it. But the truth is, teaching is one of the most powerful ways to learn. When you teach, you're forced to organize the information in your mind, simplify it, and explain it clearly. You have to understand it well enough to answer questions and anticipate confusion. That process doesn't just show you what you know, it exposes what you don't know. And once you see those gaps, you can fill them. There's a famous quote often attributed to Einstein: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. I found that to be absolutely true. You can convince yourself you've mastered a topic when you're reading it in a book or watching a video. You nod along the concepts, feel familiar, and you think, I've got this. But when you try to explain it to someone else without looking at your notes, suddenly it's not so clear. You stumble over words, forget key details, or realize you only understand the concept in abstract terms, not in a way you can actually communicate. That's the learning goldmine. Those moments of friction are exactly where you need to focus. I worked with a young woman who was learning Japanese. She was progressing slowly despite hours of study. I suggested she try teaching what she learned to a friend every day, even if it was just 5 new words or 1 grammar rule. At first, she resisted, saying, I'm not ready to teach, but that's the point. Teaching before you're ready forces you to engage with the material at a deeper level. Within a month, her recall had improved dramatically, her pronunciation was sharper, and her confidence had skyrocketed. She wasn't just memorizing words anymore, she was using them in context, explaining them, and therefore owning them. When you teach, your brain switches from passive to active mode. You're no longer just taking in information, you're processing it, reframing it, and delivering it. This creates multiple pathways for memory. You're engaging verbal processing when you explain it aloud, kinesthetic memory if you write or draw it, and emotional memory if you're interacting with someone. The more senses and modalities you involve, the stronger the memory becomes. This doesn't mean you have to stand in front of a classroom. You can teach in simple ways. Tell a family member what you learned today over dinner. Record a short video of yourself explaining a concept as if you were teaching a beginner. Even teaching an imaginary audience works. Stand in your room and talk it out. Your brain doesn't care if your students are real or pretend. It just cares that you're actively recalling, organizing, and presenting the material. The act of teaching also changes your relationship with the information. When you're learning just for yourself, it's easy to gloss over things you don't fully understand, telling yourself you'll come back to them later. But when you're responsible for helping someone else understand it, you can't hide from those gaps. You have to confront them head on. That accountability raises your standard and pushes you to clarity. I've seen this work in professional settings too. A man I coached was preparing to pitch a complex software solution to a potential client. Instead of memorizing a sales script, I told him to imagine he was teaching the system to a complete beginner. He practiced explaining it to his teenage son, who knew nothing about the software. His son's questions exposed the jargon and assumptions in his explanations, forcing him to make them clearer. By the time he gave his pitch, it was crisp, understandable, and persuasive. He closed the deal. Here's why this method works so fast: it aligns with the principle of depth of processing. The deeper you process information, the better you retain it. Reading or listening is shallow processing. It's like walking by a tree and noticing its shape. Teaching is deep processing. It's like climbing the tree, feeling the bark, counting the branches, and noticing the view from the top. You engage with the material in a way that makes it part of your mental landscape. If you want to make this practical, set a rule for yourself: within 24 hours of learning something new, teach it to someone or something else. It could be a coworker, a study buddy, a child, or even a voice memo on your phone. The 24-hour window is important because it forces you to recall the information while it's still fresh, strengthening those neural connections before they weaken. I've used this technique myself for decades. When I learn something from a book, seminar, or conversation, I immediately think, how would I teach this to someone I care about? That question forces me to rephrase the idea in my own words, strip away the fluff, and focus on the essence. And because I've made the knowledge my own, I can retrieve it easily. Even years later, the call to action here is simple: stop waiting until you're an expert. to teach. Start teaching now. Use it as a tool for your own mastery. The moment you explain a concept clearly to someone else, you've reached a deeper level of understanding than you ever could by passively reviewing it. And as a bonus, you might just inspire someone else to start learning too. That's the beautiful ripple effect of teaching. You not only solidify your own learning, you pass it forward, creating more learners in the process. When you teach, you learn twice. And learning twice is how you learn fast. You can't pour from an empty cup, and yet most people expect their brains to perform at peak levels while giving them the worst possible fuel, the least amount of rest, and almost no movement. Your brain is a physical organ. It's only 2% of your body weight, but it uses about 20% of your body's energy. If you want to learn anything fast, you have to treat your brain like an elite athlete treats their body. That means giving it the right nutrition, hydration, oxygen, and recovery time so it can operate at its best. Most people underestimate how much their physical habits affect their ability to think, focus, and remember. They'll drink 3 cups of coffee and skip breakfast, then wonder why they can't stay alert through a study session. They'll sit for hours without moving and feel mentally foggy, blaming themselves for not being disciplined enough when the real problem is that their brain isn't getting what it needs to function properly. I once coached a student who was struggling with concentration during long study days. She assumed she had a short attention span. But when we looked at her habits, we saw she was eating sugary cereal for breakfast, barely drinking water, and going hours without moving from her desk. We made 3 small changes. She swapped her breakfast for eggs, avocado, and blueberries. She drank a glass of water every hour, and she took a 5-minute walk every 45 minutes of study time. Within a week, she was astonished at the difference. She could stay focused longer, remember more, and even felt less stressed. Your brain thrives on hydration. Even a small drop in hydration, just 1 or 2%, can impair your memory and focus. Most people are chronically dehydrated, especially if they drink a lot of coffee or soda, which can dehydrate further. The simplest brain hack you can apply right now is to start your day with a large glass of water and keep one near you while you work. Every sip is like giving your brain a little more electricity to run on. Movement is another critical factor. Your brain gets oxygen through blood flow. And the best way to increase blood flow is to move your body. This doesn't mean you have to run a marathon every morning. Even a few minutes of stretching, walking, or light exercise can wake up your brain. I often say, as your body moves, your brain grooves. When you move, you're literally stimulating the release of chemicals like BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which helps your brain grow new connections. That's like giving your mind fresh wiring so it can handle more complex learning. Then there's sleep. So many people treat sleep like a luxury instead of a necessity, cutting back on it to fit in more study time. But here's the truth: your brain does a massive amount of learning while you sleep. It consolidates memories, clears out toxins, and resets itself for the next day. Skipping sleep to study is like refusing to save your work on a computer. You risk losing everything. If you want to learn anything fast, you need to respect the role of rest. Nutrition also plays a huge role. Your brain loves healthy fats like those from avocados, nuts, and fish, because they help build the myelin sheath around your neurons, which makes communication between brain cells faster and more efficient. It thrives on antioxidants from foods like blueberries, which protect it from oxidative stress. And it uses glucose for energy, but the steady kind you get from complex carbohydrates, not the sugar spike and crash from candy or soda. When you eat brain-friendly foods, you're literally giving your mind the raw materials it needs to build knowledge. One of my corporate clients had a team that was constantly in back-to-back meetings, surviving on pastries and coffee. Productivity and creativity were low. We made a small shift. Healthy snacks like almonds, fruit, and yogurt replaced the pastries, and meetings were broken up with short standing or walking breaks. Within weeks, not only were their ideas sharper, but team morale improved. It wasn't magic, it was biology. The brain finally had the right conditions to perform. Your emotional state is tied to your physical state too. If you're tired, dehydrated, and undernourished, it's harder to stay positive and motivated. Your body chemistry directly affects your mood, and your mood affects your ability to learn. That's why taking care of your brain isn't just about memory or focus. It's about creating the mental and emotional environment where learning feels easier, even exciting. So here's your call to action for the next 7 days. Treat your brain like a high-performance machine. Start your day with water, eat a brain-boosting breakfast, move your body every hour, and aim for at least 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep. Notice how your clarity improves, how your focus sharpens, and how learning feels more effortless. Keep a journal of what you learn and how you feel. You'll start to see patterns, and those patterns will prove that when you care for your brain takes care of you. The truth is, you can't expect your mind to run on empty and deliver extraordinary results. You wouldn't put low-grade fuel in a Formula One car and expect it to win a race. Your brain is even more valuable than that car, and the stakes are your life, your goals, your potential. Take care of it, and it will repay you with the ability to learn anything you want, faster and with greater joy. Your habits are either feeding your brain or starving it. Choose the habits that feed it, and watch how fast your learning accelerates. Your brain is a powerful supercomputer, but the questions you ask it are the programs you run. Most people go through life asking themselves terrible questions without even realizing it. Questions like, why am I so bad at this? Or why can't I remember anything? Send your brain searching for negative answers, reinforcing doubt and limitation. The mind is a meaning-making machine. It will find proof for whatever you tell it to look for. If you want to learn anything fast, you have to master the art of asking better questions. Every time you ask a question, your brain kicks into gear to find an answer. It's like a search engine. You type something in, and it will bring back results. If you type, why am I always tired? You're going to get a list of reasons that confirm your fatigue. But if you ask, what can I do right now to feel more energized? You'll get a completely different set of answers, ones that push you toward action and possibility. This simple shift can transform your learning speed because better questions focus your mind on solutions instead of problems. I worked with a young entrepreneur who was struggling to keep up with the demands of running his business while learning new marketing skills. Every day he'd say, I just don't have time to learn all this. His brain heard that and accepted it as truth, so he kept finding evidence of being too busy. We reframed his thinking. I told him, start asking, how can I learn this faster in the time I have? Within days, he had rearranged his schedule, discovered podcasts he could listen to while commuting, and started using short learning sprints instead of long study blocks. His progress accelerated because his brain was now actively searching for efficiency rather than reinforcing a limitation. Better questions also help you go deeper into understanding. Instead of asking, what is this? Ask, how does this work? Instead of, what's the answer? Ask, why is that the answer? Curiosity-driven questions force your brain to make connections, link ideas, and engage with the material on a deeper level. This not only helps you remember more, but also gives you the ability to apply the knowledge in different situations. Children are masters at this. They don't just accept the surface explanation, they keep asking, why? Until they hit the core of understanding. Somewhere along the way, most adults stop doing that, either because they're afraid of looking ignorant or because they've been conditioned to memorize facts instead of truly understanding them. If you bring back that childlike curiosity and ask layered questions, you'll unlock a level of learning you didn't think was possible. I remember coaching a high school student who was failing history because she hated memorizing dates and events. Instead of forcing herself to drill facts, she started asking, why did this event happen? What caused it? How would history be different if it hadn't? Those questions turned dry facts into a gripping story in her mind. She went from barely passing to acing her exams, not because she suddenly loved history, but because she learned how to make it meaningful through better questions. Another powerful technique is to ask future-based questions. Instead of, what's wrong, ask, what's next? Instead of, why is this so hard? Ask, how can I make this easier? These questions shift your focus forward instead of keeping you stuck in the past or the problem. When you're learning something challenging, the way you frame your questions can either open doors or close them. Your brain will go where your questions lead it. One of my corporate clients used this method to transform their team's brainstorming sessions. They used to start meetings by asking, what problems are we having? Which led to long, draining conversations. We switched it to, what opportunities do we have right now? Suddenly the energy in the room changed. Ideas flowed faster, creativity went up, and solutions came naturally. The questions shaped the thinking, and the thinking shaped the results. This applies to self-talk too. When you hit a wall while learning something new, it's tempting to say, I can't do this, or this is too complicated. Those are statements, and statements close your mind. Replace them with questions like, how can I break this into smaller steps? Or who can help me understand this? Questions keep your mind open and engaged, actively searching for answers instead of shutting down. If you want to make this practical, try this every time you sit down to learn something. Write down 3 questions you want answered by the end of your session. Make them specific and open-ended. As you go through the material, keep those questions in mind and see how many answers you can find. You'll notice your focus sharpens. Your retention improves, and you get more satisfaction from the process because your brain loves the feeling of completing a search. The call to action here is clear. Become a master of asking yourself better questions. Replace problem-focused questions with solution-focused ones. Replace vague questions with specific ones. Replace passive questions with active ones that demand action and creativity. Your brain is always ready to work for you. It just needs better instructions. The quality of your learning will never exceed the quality of your questions. Ask bigger, better, bolder questions. and you'll get bigger, better, bolder results. When you change your questions, you change your focus. When you change your focus, you change your life. Learning fast isn't just about taking in information, it's about making it stick for the long term. One of the most overlooked keys to rapid learning is the power of spaced repetition and active recall. Most people make the mistake of cramming, thinking that the more they repeat something in a short burst, the better they remember it. But memory doesn't work that way. Your brain is designed to strengthen information over time, not all at once. If you really want to learn something quickly and keep it for life, you have to revisit it at specific intervals and actively pull it from your memory instead of passively reviewing it. Here's why this works. When you first learn something, your brain creates a fragile connection between neurons. If you don't revisit that information, the connection fades. This is called the forgetting curve. But every time you recall the information, you strengthen that connection, making it easier to retrieve in the future. The magic happens when you space those recall sessions out over increasing intervals, first after a few hours, then after a day, then after 3 days, then a week, and so on. The spacing tells your brain, this is important, keep it, and it moves the knowledge into long-term memory. The second part, active recall, is just as crucial. Most people think reading notes or highlighting is enough, but that's passive learning. It gives you the illusion of knowing because the information is right in front of you. Active recall flips the process. You close the book, hide the notes, and force your brain to bring the information back on its own. This effortful retrieval is what makes the memory stronger. Think of it like working a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. I coached a medical student who was drowning in anatomy terms. She used to spend hours just reading her textbook, but she couldn't remember the material during exams. We switched her to a spaced repetition system using flashcards. She would review the terms right after learning them, then again the next day, then 3 days later, then a week later. Each time, she used active recall, looking at the body part and saying its name without peeking. Within weeks, her recall was sharper, and she started scoring in the top of her class. The time she spent studying didn't increase. She just used it more efficiently. Technology makes this easier than ever. There are apps that track your learning and automatically schedule your reviews at optimal intervals, but you don't need fancy tools. You can create a simple system with a notebook or calendar, write down what you learned today, and schedule times to revisit it over the next few weeks. Even 5-minute reviews can have a massive impact when done consistently. Another example is language learning. If you learn a new word today and never use it again, you'll probably forget it by tomorrow. But if you recall it later that day, again the next day, and then in a conversation 3 days later, it becomes part of your vocabulary. Your brain starts to see it as relevant because you've used it repeatedly in meaningful ways. That's the secret, not just repetition, but repetition with purpose. Spaced repetition also works beautifully with teaching, which we discussed earlier. When you teach something you learned a week ago, you're naturally recalling it after a delay, which strengthens it in your mind. This is why some of the best teachers are also the best learners. They're constantly reviewing material by explaining it to others. It's important to combine spaced repetition with variety. If you repeat the same information in the same way every time, your brain can get bored and tune out. Mix it up, recall it while walking, while explaining it to a friend, while drawing it out, or while applying it in a real-world situation. Each variation adds another pathway in your brain, making the memory even stronger. I remember working with a sales team that needed to memorize product details for a launch. Instead of reading the brochure over and over, they practiced spaced recall by quizzing each other in the mornings, role-playing customer conversations in the afternoons, and writing quick summaries before bed. Within 2 weeks, they didn't just know the product, they owned it. Their confidence during sales calls skyrocketed because they could recall details instantly and effortlessly. If you think about it, spaced repetition mirrors how we naturally remember the most important things in life. You don't remember your best friend's phone number because you stared at it for 8 hours one day. You remember it because you've recalled it hundreds of times over years. You didn't memorize your home address by cramming. You learned it because you used it in spaced intervals across different contexts. This is simply applying that natural process to intentional learning. Your call to action is to build a review habit into your learning routine. Don't just finish a book and put it on the shelf. Schedule times to recall its key ideas. Don't just watch a course once, go back to it after a few days, then again after a week, and quiz yourself without looking at the material. Track your intervals and be consistent. It will feel like extra work at first, but soon you'll notice that you can recall information weeks or months later without struggling. That's when you know the learning has truly stuck. In the end, learning fast isn't about rushing, it's about remembering. If you can recall something instantly and apply it when needed, you've truly mastered it. Spaced repetition and active recall are like a double lock on your knowledge, keeping it secure and ready whenever you need it. Use them together, and you'll not only learn faster, you'll never have to waste time relearning what you've already learned.